Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Miracle Larry podcast. I'm your host, Jack Cush. Of course, I'm joined by Larry Kelly. And today we have two friends. Requirements for this podcast were to be on Larry's frequent flyer, frequent caller list for the last 50 years. I'm joined by Tom and Danny. Larry, why don't you introduce our friends?
Okay, Jack. How are you, Jack?
Good, doing great.
All right. This podcast is going to be a little special because the two guys were sort of stealing a little bit from Jason Bateman's podcast, where we have surprise guests, and these are two of my dearest friends on the planet, along with Jack. So I'm sitting here on a screen facing three of the people I'm closest to on the planet, and Tommy and Danny have their own stories of what they went through in the beginning of COVID. And that's what we're going to concentrate on here. But this is my dear friend Tommy and my dear friend Danny. And you're gonna love them as much as I do. So take it over, Jack. Let's do it.
You know, it's formidable to be in the room with these guys because really all you have to do is sit back and just watch the words fly. It's amazing. So to have these guys here is just great. I want to begin with kind of what we covered last week, which is what were we doing leading up to the pandemic? I actually looked over some notes and, some texts that were flying between us all in February and in March. And, back then, Danny, you were dealing with and your son having an illness and dealing with that. Right. And I was dealing with my brother who had a heart attack. And Tommy was dealing with his stuff. So I want you guys to tell us what you were doing in the lead up, not knowing what was going to happen to Larry. That was a total surprise in March. But where was your mindset as this COVID thing was playing out, and did it affect your life, and when did it? Tom, why don't you begin?
Sure, Jack. So I can remember in December of 2019. Danny, Larry, and myself and our significant others, we would always do a vacation every year. And we've been to some pretty cool places. You joined us in Austin that one year, Jack. And we had reserved a pretty sweet little Airbnb in Key West, Florida. And it was awesome. And as the news of COVID was starting, I think we all three of us agreed that, it's probably not the greatest thing in the world to travel right now. So we canceled that reservation.
Plus, you were really sick at the time.
Yeah, and I was sick, really sick. I don't know what I had. It was pre-COVID, and I've never had COVID, but I was really out for like 3 weeks. It was really bad. That
story comes up a lot. Like prior to COVID, people being really sick.
That's where I got it.
What'd you say?
So anyway, after I retired, did a lot of traveling, and we found out we were never in our house. So we sold our house and we moved into a condo, with the thought being that we could just lock it up and travel the globe and do what we want to do. And when we were doing that, that's when COVID started hitting. And I can remember texting Danny and Larry a few pictures of my new condo. And that just led to, a text chain of the next 3 or 4 days talking back and forth. And that's when Larry was coming down with COVID. And I can remember over the last 3 or 4 days of that, a palpable difference in the tone of Larry's text as, "How you feeling today, Kel?" I feel like crap. It was just noticeably different, his tone and how he was responding to Danny and me on that email. And then Katie barred the door, the crap hit the fan, and the rest of it, we'll talk about. I'm sure you're talking about it all through this podcast and whatnot, but that's what was going on in my life there, right during and before COVID hit.
How about you, Dan?
Yeah, well, in that December, right before it, I had been to New York with my daughter, Kelly, and Russ, and we had spent some time with Larry, and my son got very ill. And so when I got back in January and February, we were getting through this serious illness that he had. And the year prior to it, I had a very difficult time with some losses. So it was a complicated time in my life, as most people have. You know, you live long enough, you have rough spots, and this was a rough spot, but we were on the backside and coming through it. And February started to change. We were getting ready for our trip together, and then it started to leak out about this COVID thing. And at first it was, something that was far away, and it's in Italy, it's in other places in the world. And as it started to come closer, Larry was doing a show in New Jersey then, I think, and he was excited about that, and he was in very good spirits. And then March came, and he got feeling bad, and we were in contact, like Tom said, and it started to get a little frightening, because at first it was, I just don't feel so good. And, he's had some bouts with things over the years, and they come and go. And this was hanging in there, and it started to get more serious, and it was getting more serious around him. I had a plan for my sister to come out and visit. And I remember contacting her and say, I know I got the ticket, I did all that, but I think you better stay. I don't want you traveling now. And then, when Larry got taken into the hospital, and Dawn called and said, he's in the hospital, and that it just became a stark reality where my first thought was, I thought I was getting through this hard time, and here we go. Like, what is this? And I just felt this heavy kind of weight, like, I hope this isn't going to be something serious. But I didn't have any idea what was going to happen next, but it just felt very ominous at the time because of the circumstances. So,
Yeah.
it was a strange time leading up to it. And it was positive 2 months before, and then it just started to deteriorate quickly.
Yeah, such is life. I mean, you go through these hard things in your life, and personal losses and stuff you deal with, and life gets good. Life was good for Larry. He was in, traveling, going to Florida, engaging in high risk acting in New Jersey, and Lord knows what happened after that.
Did we, Dan, Tommy, were we planning New Orleans then?
Yes. No, I think, Tom, I think you were 1 year later, Tom, to be honest with you. We were planning to go to New Orleans.
That's right. It was New Orleans Day.
It was New Orleans because when COVID first started to come, Dawn sent a text and said, "Hey, I hear about this COVID thing. Do you guys, should we be thinking about it?" And Larry's text, which I had, was, "I'm going."
Yeah, I remember that.
I'm going to New Orleans. I think the thing, once we got through the first year of COVID, and we were all a little bit, and Larry was out of the hospital, that's when we planned to go to Florida, and we had to cancel that because there was that, they had
Resurgence,
resurgence, and so we stopped it. But yeah, we were going to New Orleans, and because we wanted to try that out. So anyway, COVID infected our memories too a little bit, obviously.
Well, that another thing.
Age has nothing to do with it. It's
yeah, right.
No.
Right.
All right. So my next question has to do with, Larry quickly goes in the hospital. It's like a gigantic slap in the face, and, stab to the stomach, and we're really not sure how all this happened. But it plays out. It's months and months of deep drama and heartache and worry. And then he survives, and he's here today. And we know he did what we didn't think was possible, that he would walk out of the hospital and he'd walk out as Larry, as we know him, meaning just as bright, just as funny, just as smart, just as, willing to go toe to toe on anything. Is just unbelievable. My question to you guys is, why did he live? I mean, is he just too angry to die? Too mean to die? You just can't kill a cockroach? What? Or was it? Am I responsible individually for his? No, I don't know. But I'm asking a lot of people this question, including myself and Larry. But why do you guys think he lived?
okay. You said think.
Well,
We're not, we still have doubts.
Well, we think he's there, unless that's an AI.
Unless I did die.
I don't know that there's a definite answer to that. I mean, there was a lot of prayers. I mean, my feeling is, it reconfirmed the power of prayer to me, because I know everyone in my family, my distant family, everyone knows Larry. If they know me, they know Larry. I'm talking about nieces and nephews, not just brothers and sisters. And there were so many people praying for him that I just can't discount that, because the circumstances were so dire that for him to come back like he is a miracle to me. And I think that it was just so many people sending up prayers, needing it. I know personally, my prayers were not, they were not directly at Larry, come back, please help me. It was, how can I possibly deal with this? How can I possibly face the fact that Larry might not come back? I just wasn't ready, and I didn't know how I could manage it. And my prayers were, just please give me the grace to deal with this. And if this is going to happen, because the conversations that Tommy and Jack, we were having, they were getting worse and worse. I mean, I could tell from, that you were trying to, you didn't sugarcoat anything, obviously, but we always would say, oh, this is going on, that's going, and it was bad. It was all bad. There was really not much bright spots, except that Larry was still there and he wasn't supposed to be. And my own thought was, I just kept thinking of watching him wrestle in high school, and often he was getting pinned and struggling to fight to get to the end of the period. And that's all I kept thinking, is that's what he's doing. He's bridging, he's fighting, because it and I just thought I have to fight along with him, but I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. And at that point, because Jack, you were giving us this information, I just really prayed for the strength to manage.
Tom, what do you think?
A lot of the same thoughts as Danny. I would say twofold. I would say, I think Larry survived for two basic reasons. Number one, Danny alluded to, Larry is just a tough guy. He won't back down to anybody when he gets his standard up. He's gritty, he's tough, and he was going to fight that however he could in his subconscious when he was in a coma for all those many days. And I had confidence in Larry. Other than that, I think it was faith. And let me expound on that a little bit. When Caroline and I were talking to Dawn, after like a day or two, I asked Dawn, there's a lot of people, the Muddahs, which we might talk about in a little bit, that really ought to know about this, because there's power in prayer. That's what I'm thinking inside. So I asked Dawn for permission. Can I let other people know what's going on in Larry's life, health-wise, so that we can get more people involved in praying? And she said, absolutely. So I can remember the text of the first email. It was mudded down, Larry needs your prayer. And I sent it out to all the Muddahs, of which I think there were 17 of us left. But that quickly propagated to other, them telling other people. And what became 2 people became 17, became 27, became 137, became thousands of people. And the reason I use the word faith, the working definition of faith is a total dependence on God and a desire to do his will. And how most of us do that in times of trouble, depend on God, is through prayer. So we're showing our faith through praying to God. And I'm not convinced, I'm totally convinced the power of prayer, of thousands of people praying for Larry Kelly, is the reason Larry's here right now. My faith allows me to believe that, and I believe that with every fiber in my being. So he's a tough son of a gun,
Jack,
and the power of prayer.
thank you, Tom. Jack, can I just throw something in here? Both you guys, thank you. But I think I agree with you. You're absolutely right. But I want to tell a little story. Tommy brought up the Muddahs, which is a group of guys from high school that have been close since high school, and we're well in our 60s, on the short end of 70. But Tommy in our group is our spiritual advisor. Tommy is the only person I know who's read the Bible 24 times, So if we have any questions, we ask Tommy, and Tommy fills us in. So I want to tell this little story, and I wonder if Tommy and Danny remember it, because it's really bizarre to me and mind-boggling. But 6 months before COVID and I got sick, our vacation that year was in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where Tommy lives. And Tommy's wife, Carol Ann, had gotten tickets to in Pennsylvania, there's a show called Sight and Sound, which is the largest amphitheater that has production values that I say makes Broadway look like community theater. It's all based on religious themed shows, and there's 17 camels on stage and horses running down the aisles and more goats and chickens than you ever saw. And so Carol Ann got tickets for us, and we sat in the first row in the mezzanine. We had great seats, and the mezzanine was on the same level, just it was the second tier. And I was sitting, there were 6 of us, and I was sitting all the way on the right, and Tommy was sitting all the way on the left, and everybody else was in between. So the story that we're watching is Jesus. And all of a sudden, this story of Lazarus comes up. And I had never heard of Lazarus. I'm not as well versed in the Bible as Tommy is. So at intermission, I had leaned and, I said to Tommy, because Lazarus rose from the dead. And I said, Tommy, what's with this Lazarus guy? What's with, I thought Jesus was the only one that rose from the dead. And Tommy explained to me how Lazarus rose. Jesus actually rose Lazarus from the dead. So that was then. And then Dan, tell what happened to you that you told me about the day before Easter when I opened my eyes.
Okay,
Dan called me on the phone to tell me the story.
So this is why my faith and prayer is reaffirmed. Okay. Not challenged, reaffirmed. So I was taking walks. Everybody was doing something when Larry was in this, we're fighting this pandemic. Larry's fighting for his life, and everybody's doing whatever they have to do to try to keep sane. And I kind of live out in the country, so I'm not around a lot of people, so I can go outside. I wasn't afraid to be outside, and I was taking walks all the time and thinking about what was going on and trying to figure out how to manage. So we had a particularly bad conference call with Jack and Tommy in the days prior to Easter. I might have been on Thursday, and things looked very bad for Larry. And we were really at that point waiting for the next shoe to drop and the final end to come. So Good Friday, I'm taking a walk. I say to my wife, Marie, I'm going to go out for a walk. And she knows I'm very upset. So I'm walking and I'm thinking, please, I don't think I can handle losing my best friend at this time. And the thought that comes into my head at that moment is Lazarus. Now, I don't walk around thinking about Bible stories. Okay. When I say I have a strong faith and I pray, I do, but I don't think like that. It doesn't happen to me. It hit me like a lightning bolt. And at that moment, I was about 2 miles away from my house. I knew Larry was going to get through this. I walked home. I told Marie, and I called Jack. I was absolutely convinced Larry was going to be okay. And Jack said, wow, he's on one hand, he knows I'm not a fanatic and he's telling me, okay, Dad, that's very powerful. On the other hand, he's a doctor and he knows what he just heard and he's talking to the doctors, but his face changed too, because this is powerful. And, Sunday morning, Easter Sunday, I got a call and Larry opened his eyes. And that's about as strong a sign and a confirmation of the power of prayer as I've ever had in my life. And it gives me hope in these troubled times.
Yeah. When Danny called me, we had a long phone call, and usually I walk around in my living room and dining room, and ultimately I'm sitting down. It's kind of dusk in Dallas, and he tells me this Lazarus story, and I'm like, wow. And like Larry, I don't know the full story, so I immediately get out the Bible and I immediately read the Lazarus story, and yeah, I'm confused because everything we had heard in the last 5 days is just bad. He's going to die. He's got no chance. But we're also changing our prayers to, we got to pray big. He's going to live and he's going to be Larry. But did you really believe it? And then Danny comes up with the Lazarus story. And the next thing I know, I'm banging my fist on the dining room table, yelling, Larry, come out, which is, that's what Jesus says. He says, Lazarus, come out. And that's how he rises from the dead. And
yeah, I was going to say, Jack, you actually had a story about on the high school steps saying, Larry, come out, Larry, come out, and Tommy's the one that told us about the Lazarus story. I had never heard of it until
so this gets better. So the hero of the miracle of Lazarus isn't Lazarus, and it isn't Jesus. It's Lazarus' two sisters, Mary and Martha, who had enough faith to go to Jesus and beg him to raise their brother from the dead. And he was so torn up, Jesus, with their utter faith and belief in God. And this was 4 days after Lazarus passed away, that he went to Bethany and he raised him from the dead. So really, the faith champions of that whole Lazarus story are Mary and Martha and their faith in God. And
I told you he was our spiritual advisor.
Yeah.
I told you he can recite that Bible backwards.
But that's got a parallel to the story, meaning
it does. With all the faith we demonstrated, right? Thousands of people.
We were in the information sharing business, and we were sharing big messages, and we didn't all get. Everybody got faith. All of us that followed Larry got a lot of faith during this story. And before he had his turnaround, meaning that's where it was actually in play. And that's where I think it had its greatest impact. Obviously, it gets enriched and fortified by what actually happened when he opens his eyes on Easter Sunday.
Jack, and jump ahead to when I actually did go home on July 22nd, and I was being wheeled down Amsterdam Avenue on the way to my house. Most of my neighbors from my building were gathered. There were people that were coming with me down Amsterdam, but when we got to my building, all the people in my building were outside, out front, and they're screaming, Lazarus, Lazarus, which is making me think of Danny. What Danny's telling me, it's making me think of Tommy in Lancaster. There is my story is a parable to Lazarus. No doubt.
That was a great day. I mean, we were watching that live on the TV. I think your brother Danny was showing it live. We were crying like babies watching that. That was a great day.
Let me say one thing. We were talking about the Muddahs, and I thought a lot about it because Tommy was sending out messages to them, and everybody was answering. And the thing about the Muddahs that was such a unique thing was there was a couple of things that made you a Muddah. It wasn't just being in organized sports together. That was one of the ways we hung out, but it was how we were so competitive in everything that we did. I mean, it could be anything. It could be throwing bottle caps somewhere, and all of us were like that. There was two traits that everybody that is in this group that a Muddah has. One of them is unbelievable competitiveness, and the other one is tremendous loyalty. And no matter what happened with the Muddahs, and we had our battles internal, but whenever we came up against any adversarial type affair, whether it was on an athletic field or anywhere, you could count on the Muddahs, no matter what. And I mean, and so this was another sign where you could count on them. You let them know there's a problem, they're there. And it just follows through for 50 years after. You know, we've been through a lot of things together, a lot of hard times. And I think that helped cement it. You know, it wasn't just our successes. It was losing and watch and being there with somebody that's trying till the end, and we don't make it. You know, we learned a lot in our losses. We cried together, and we had losses with people that passed away at a young age. We were all together at funerals at 19 years old, and I think that cemented something in the Muddahs that is still there today. And when we knew that Larry, one of the guys that made everybody laugh, I guess one of the other traits of the Muddahs is we laugh all the time. When we get together, if we don't see each other for years, the first thing that happens is we start laughing. I mean, that's why everybody likes it so much.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was just an important thing. And when Tommy was sending those messages and everybody was responding, it was very powerful. Very powerful.
Tommy, go ahead.
So, you know, we talk about the Muddahs. I have a little Muddahs trivia for people. I said before 22, and the reason I say 22, what I'm about to show you guys is actually 52 years old. And it was made by Bob Neugebauer in a printing class. And this is before contact directories in your iPhones. I still have this in my wallet. It's dog-eared, but it's the names and phone numbers of the 22 founding fathers of the Muddahs. So, Jack, 567-6102. That was your phone number. And also what's unique about that,
you got to say 555.
You have an
You got to say
LT9 number.
555.
Kel, you were LT9-6595. Danny, I apologize. The last two numbers are worn out, but you were LT9-6253, maybe? I don't know. I take it the last number. But that's the original. And then I added Phil Ardito, and in the back, I had the Wharf telephone number on it.
The
Of
Wharf,
course.
Still have it.
our favorite bar. Sure.
Trivia question 2. What were we called before the Muddahs, and why?
The Royal Muddahs?
Close is one
Little
word
Muddah.
missing. Junior.
Oh, Junior.
Yeah.
Close.
Because of
And you
Pete
could probably
Costanza.
talk to Jay or Woody. I would say they're historians of the Muddahs, but a lot of us had older brothers that were in the original Muddahs. I think Bump Holtz was in that. But ask Jay or Woody. I think we were the Royal Junior Muddahs before we were ever the Muddahs.
Yeah, because of Willie's brother Pete. Bump
Yeah,
Holtz.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
You know, and the play I wrote that got published in my thanks, and one of the things I thank is the Order of the Royal Muddahs. The Order.
I saw it.
So along the same vein of the Muddahs were the vectors of information. But, you know, the information network really starts right here. And if we replace Larry's picture and presence on this podcast with Larry's wife, these were the people that were very much involved. So, I mean, we all found out about what happened through Dawn, and then we all interjected ourselves into the story. And then I was getting daily, every other day reports from the hospital staff about, and like you said, Danny, the all the messages I sent to you guys were the same. The good news is he's still alive, but there's plenty of other bad news. And, whether it was seizures or brain edema or, sepsis or pneumonia or it never really got very good. But I just wanted to quickly say the info stream was I'd get information, I'd call and talk to Larry's family, and then I would talk to either Danny for solace and Tommy to help spread the word. Tommy was really good at making sure other people know, but we all had our own networks of spreading information.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It was something else, but and the funny thing is, it's not even just these friends. I mean, I have nieces and nephews that were praying for Larry. That Larry knew everybody in my family from weddings and times, and so that it stretched out, like Tommy said, to thousands of people, no doubt. That's a very powerful thing.
I look back that there was a lot of news coverage, and every now and then, daily. No, not daily. That's a lie. I look back at some of the news coverage, and I actually on that the end of that tape of my exit from the rehab center, I do credit everybody. I'm totally convinced that there was an energy at play, and we can call that God, we can call that friendship, we can call that anything. But I know that there was something with me, and Jack and I will get into that later in the podcast. But there's no doubt in my mind that medicine and something else is responsible for me being here. And
let's end with.
Can't even explain it.
Let's end with each of you, Tom and Danny, telling something about what happened after Larry got out of the hospital. I'll suggest, and Larry, you can comment on this too, but we got around to Thanksgiving and we had a Zoom call. By then we were all experts at Zoom, and we had a Zoom call with, there must have been 15, 16 Muddahs on the call. Larry, what do you remember about that call?
We had a call? No, I'm joking. Yeah, that was our first all get together, and it was on Zoom. And I don't know who organized that, but it was incredibly moving, Jack. There were some people on there. I'm in a very strange position where I'm one of the few people that know who's alive, who knows what people would say about him if he was dead. Because
Right.
all the good things people said about me is because they all thought, he's gonna die. So I got all the good stuff. So
You're a modern day
I have
George
to live
Bailey.
with that. Say it again, Tom?
You're
Say
a
it
modern day George Bailey.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
it's become my favorite movie, which is really weird, but
It
you're
always was
absolutely
my
right. I
favorite
mean, I teased Jan, who wrote the article for the Times, that I'm the only person who has read his obituary in the Times, who has read his obituary in the Times, so so that Zoom with all the Muddahs is all part of the surrealness to me of, what I have to deal with. I can never thank you guys enough, and I can't. And but I carry that with me, that gratefulness and that thankfulness, but I carry it with me every day.
Like George Bailey, Larry, you're a very rich man.
There you go.
And I spoke at some gala, and I actually said that oh my God, I just lost it. But I forgot.
George Bailey. It'll come back. Danny, tell something about it. Larry got out of the hospital.
Well, to me, it was just such a I was elated. I don't even know how to even explain, that when he walked out, like Tommy said, when Danny Kelly, his brother, was filming this live, and I'm watching it, and I was so emotional. I mean, as you get older, you get emotional anyway, but it's ridiculous at this point. I just couldn't believe how ecstatic I was to see him. And I knew, I knew it was the beginning of a long, rehab period, but I just felt such tremendous relief. I guess that's all, because I knew no matter what condition Larry was in, that thing that burned inside him was still there. And for me, that was all I needed. I just was happy. It seems simple, but it's a big deal. I was very happy, and I just couldn't wait to see him. I couldn't wait to see him in person, and it was going to turn out to be quite a while before I could. But because we had some plans, and then COVID came back, and I couldn't fly, and it was frustrating. But when we started, we would pretty regularly do a FaceTime or a Zoom call. And every time it would cut his face, and even now, when his face comes on, it makes me laugh. I mean, it kind of always did, but it really does now. It's just like when that face hits the screen, I start laughing, and that's the way we start, and that's the way it continued for me.
So, Danny, it's one thing to hear or read about your dreams coming true, Larry living, but then to watch him walk out of that hospital,
right,
which was our prayer.
Right.
That was just crushing and unbelievable. Tommy,
Yeah.
Let's say.
Well, later in that year, 2020, COVID was still hanging around, but Caroline, myself, and Don and Larry decided to heck with it. And so we drove in to Manhattan from Lancaster, and we just swooped in and picked up Don and Larry.
I was just going to tell that story, Tommy. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
We went up to an Airbnb up by Woodstock, New York, and we were right on the Hudson River. And in fact, right over my shoulder right there, that middle picture is a picture that Don took of Larry and me hugging in the foyer of his apartment building that day. And it's just a prized picture that I have. But a better picture that I like, and I sent it to Larry a week or so ago. I was going through my camera roll. Larry was recovering, but he still had a lot to do on the rehab station when we went on this trip. So I think it was the second day. Larry's lying on the couch of this beautiful living room in his Airbnb. And he's lying on his back. And I say, Larry, smile. And he smiles and he puts his thumb up. And the smile on his face and just the look on his face, he looked to be about 15 years old in this picture. Whenever I scroll through my photos, I look at that picture now and it gives me joy. So we had a good 3 or 4 days, and it was right before Thanksgiving. It was mid-October. We had a Thanksgiving dinner that Caroline and Don made, and it was a great way to reconnect with Larry and Don and try to get through this whole COVID thing.
Jack, thanks, Tommy. And I was just going to talk about that trip, so I have to shift gears. Jack, just going back to my release and that day that you're talking about, I do have to tell, and I may have already told this in a podcast, but I do have to tell that Dawn had called me 2 days. I knew I was going home on the 22nd, or I was getting released on the 22nd. And at that point, I had only, in terms of rehab, when I went home, the most I had taken was 7 steps with the walker. My left side still didn't work that well from the waist up. But they sent me home, and I fought. I said, I don't think I'm ready. I got to do some more work because I thought there's so much that has to be attended to me, But Dawn called 2 days before I was getting released, and because my brother was saying people were going to come to the release, And I said to Dawn, you think anybody's going to be there? And she said, I don't know. Danny says so. I guess so, So I get wheeled, and I guess a crowd started forming outside the rehab center because the staff of the rehab center was now following me to the front door because of something was going on outside. It was like, whoa, but when I get to the glass, and I always tell this story, is that, I look outside and there's like 4 TV cameras. There's a documentary crew. There's about 150 people waving signs and wearing masks that say Miracle Larry. And I always say that that's the day that, Larry Kelly had another alter ego that was Miracle Larry. But when I got to the glass, I'm in the wheelchair. And I turned to Lane, who was my occupational therapist. She's on my right, and my speech therapist is on the left. And I said, Lane, give me the cane. I want to walk out. She says, I don't think that's a good idea. She goes, no. I said, no, it's okay. Just give me the cane. I'll walk out. I'll sit in the chair as soon as I get outside. She says, no, yeah, I said this, and it's amazing to me. I said, I have to show them that I'm trying. I have to show. So that walking out was made 10 seconds before I actually walked out. The decision to walk out. I said, and I walked out and I sat in the chair. And when I walked out, I hear my brother and people screaming, he's walking. It's like Tiny Tim. It's like Tiny Tim in a Christmas Carol. He's walking. So anyway, I have to tell that story because that was a very weird day.
How you think about these theatrical things in these moments is what makes you Larry.
Man, the fact that the biggest thing is that I opened my eyes on Easter any other day, and there's no story here. There's no story. I couldn't have written that any better. I was like, really?
Also
I opened my eyes on Easter.
All right, folks. I want to thank Tom and Danny and Tiny Tim. I mean, Big Larry, for a great review of some great moments that have gone on recently. So,
and I do want to say, Jack, that Danny and Tommy and your relationship to me and what you went through with me, I do have to reiterate that so many people went through very similar things around the country. That was COVID wasn't just our story; it was nationwide, and many people lost people, and you guys could have lost somebody you knew, but it didn't work out that way. But many people did, and I think we do this podcast and any speaking that I do, I think I speak for the millions that have died, and I really believe that's why I'm doing this, and what I do is that just it's something that happened in our lifetime that we never thought was going to happen, and it may happen again if we don't learn from what happened before. Well, I think we may see another one in our lifetime. I mean, germs are everywhere nowadays. And so anyway, thank you, guys. I love you all. You know that. And keep the faith. It's all good. Keep the faith.
Love you. Good day, mates.
Take care, guys.
Cheers, boys.